Welcome to the Flux Dev Meeting, September 10th.
Hey everybody. So I have a few updates for this week. We are we're actually close to wrap up the work with external artifact API. So we have already implemented this in source controller. It's just the API itself. Source controller does not watch or reconcile any external artifact objects. It does export, like it only exposes the API in the API package and the CRD, of course. Uh, then we have already merged the PRs in customized controller and Helm controller to consume external artifacts. So those controllers are now watching external artifact objects. And we have already also implemented the SDK, a large part of it at least, I mean, the first version for sure in the package repo. So in the package repo now we have a package called Artifact, and that package has that Go module has packages for dealing with artifacts, mostly storage. So how source controller stores the artifacts in its disk to serve HTTP requests to the other controllers and everything. We made it an SDK in package. So and we're even building. So we have this controller for a long time that has served as an example of how to do something that watches sources, right? The source watcher project. So under github.com/fluxcd, we have /source watcher for a long time, and we're building the V2 of this project. So we're bumping a major version there. It's going from 1 to 2. And that controller will now have a useful API. It's gonna have this API called Artifact Generator. So we have this other new CRD in the Flux ecosystem. This project is not part of Flux CD core, so it's not going to be, at least on a first moment, as part of the official distribution of CNCF Flux. It remains as an ecosystem project, and it has served as an example of how to watch Flux sources over the years, and it's now becoming also an example of how to implement an external source controller using the SDK we have shipped in the package repo. So this controller is using this SDK and is showing how you can build a controller that does everything, not just watching the Flux sources, but also consuming and transforming them into new artifacts that are exposed as external artifact CRRs in this case, right? So it's a very simple spec. The artifact generator API has two spec fields, spec.sources and spec.artifacts. In spec.sources, you list the sources that the controller should watch for that artifact generator object, right? So one object will have a list of sources to watch and a list of artifacts to produce. So the reconciliation is the process of fetching the sources that are listed in the spec and building the artifacts with a series of copy operations. So similar to Git repository spec.include, right? We have this field for a long time in source controller Git repository API. Spec.include allows you to include other Git repository objects, and you can like copy specific paths of the artifact produced by the Git repo into specific paths in the final artifact. So you can compose it's literally, so the utility of this new API called artifact generator is to compose and decompose artifacts consuming the upstream types, the Flux upstream type, source types. So you can use bucket, Git repository, and OCI repository in the sources. Then you can list a bunch of them, and then you specify a list of, for every artifact you want to build, you specify a list of copy operations of from paths and to paths, right? From the source and to the artifact. And this way you can compose a complex source based on a bunch of other sources. Or you can decompose, right? Let's say you have one Git repository source and you want to split that in two sources. One external artifact has one of the directories under the Git repo artifact, and another external artifact will be a different directory copied from the Git repository artifact. So you can like split as well. This is all very exciting. We are close to having an MVP. And I guess with that, and after a bit of testing, we will be done with RFC 12 for external artifacts. So we have covered everything. Oh yeah, we also still have to write a few documentation, like we want to have probably a link to Source Watcher in the website and a bunch of guidelines of how to build an external source controller using the external artifact API. Source Watcher is the main example of how to do that. And we're even thinking about having a set of compliance rules to say that an external source controller is good from our perspective. We can have a list. We're planning to have a list of external source controllers listed in the FluxCD website, but only those that pass a set of conformance criteria, which involve security features and things like that, and that the controller is properly interacting with the external artifact API the way we designed it. So yeah, very exciting. This opens up Flux for applying a plethora of source artifacts, and also encourages, like we're ready also to list external source controller as well to popularize good external source controllers that pass our conformance. So yeah, very exciting. Besides that, for Flux 2.7, that will be released in the second half of this month, we need to wrap up all this external artifact work, and there's also one more PR that I can recall that needs to be merged. There's a contributor working on it, which is towards the image APIs GA. So we're basically missing the Flux, suspend, resume, and reconcile image policy commands. Because now this API has the suspend field, so spec.suspend is a new field in image policy, and that comes with all these commands, right? So we still have to ship those commands in the Flux CLI. I am doing a release candidate. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the release. So we released a few, like discussed before in previous meetings. We released a few release candidate versions of the controllers. So we have a release candidate of source controller. We have a release candidate of Helm controller. Like we have the this helped us both ship a few PRs that were still open, releasing a source controller release candidate. So in image automation controller, we were able to merge a PR bumping to the RC version of source controller. We did the same in Helm controller. So we in the Helm controller integration with external artifacts, we bumped the API package of source controller to the release candidate version. We did the same in customized controller. We're also probably gonna release a release candidate for a customized controller for the same reason as Helm controller for testing. And I am also going to release a release candidate version of the API package of image reflector controller. For the field I just talked about, spec.suspend is required in the CLI. So to merge this pull request in the CLI, we need image reflector controller release candidate version as well. We don't normally do this, but this is very special release.
Very interconnected.
Yes. So it called for these release candidate versions that we don't expect to do again in the future anytime soon, probably. So yeah. Release candidates, external artifacts, pull requests, and of course, there's still the pull request for making image reflector controller and image automation controller GA. Those controllers are still on 0.x versions. They're gonna become 1.x, and their APIs are going to V1. So from V1 beta 2, it's gonna be V1. Those PRs are still an item on our list. And that's it for Flux 2.7, I guess. We expect to have it all done by the end of the month. There's also a Helm upgrade tomorrow. So tomorrow, Helm is gonna release 3.19. And we should upgrade Helm and source controller and Helm controller and everywhere else as well to keep it up to date. Right. So yeah, I guess that's it for updates from my side about the Flux release. Any questions or discussions about
So there's a lot of moving
all
parts
of
that
that?
have to come together before we can do the minor release every quarter-ish, every third of the year, I guess. There's controller runtime, there's Helm, there's
Kubernetes?
Kubernetes. Am I missing anything? I mean, of course, all
Well, we
the
also
things
do like
internally in the tree, like you just described, how we need the image reflector controller release before we can build the CLI with the feature to flip the new.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always this version, this order of where how we release the controllers. The first ones are source controller, image reflector controller, and notification controller. Then release the other controllers that depend on them. So customize and Helm controller depend on source controller, and image automation depends on source controller and image reflector controller. And the CLI depends on all of them for some things, right? For commands that touch new API fields, like in the case of image reflector. So yeah, that's why I also like releasing some release candidates.
So that's the main reason for these release candidates, not because we're looking for feedback on the releases, correct?
Yeah, the release candidates are for two things. Are for these things where we need to merge a bunch of PRs that depend on this order of the release, and to test customized controller and Helm controller with the external artifacts API. Because what this API is bringing to Flux is functionality in those two controllers, right? As I said before, source controller there's no behavior whatsoever connected to external artifact. Source controller only has external artifact as an API. It only, so when we generate manifests in, it's only the source controller repository, Git repository is just for the distribution of the external artifact CRD and the functionalities in customize controller and help controller. So we need release candidates of those two to test end to end. So, do we have any other topics for the meeting in the agenda?
Are there any CFPs open that people need to be aware of? Quick plug for the Cozy Summit CFP. I'll put a link in the docs.
Cool.
Cozy Summit is for Cozy Stack. The CFP has 4 days left in it if you're a Cozy Stack user. Cozy Stack has Flux in it, of course.
Yeah, since you're talking about that, I'm not sure this was already said here, but I'll say it again. We have half a day for the very first FluxCon in Atlanta this year, in KubeCon, North America. So on the first day, on Monday, the afternoon, we're gonna, during the whole afternoon, we're gonna have a whole agenda on Flux Talks for the very first FluxCon. See you there.
Maybe we should plug the funding opportunities. There's CNCF scholarships available. There's a maintainer fund. There's a travel fund. There are many opportunities for people to get to KubeCon if you've never been able to go before. If you're into the community at all, you may be eligible for one of these. Those deadlines are coming up soon.
Cool. All right, so there's no other topics. I think we can wrap up.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys next week.
Yep. See you around.